Welcome back. What's up, racist? Good morning. Yeah, okay. Let's wait for a couple more people to trickle in. Get it? Because rain. What's up, people? Hi. Welcome to the long-awaited, awful ASMR stream. I know, right? People said it's never going to happen. Here, let's get some sound done. This is a book I'm going to be reading. You'll never guess what it is. What? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? I'm muted. I'm stupid. Well, it wasn't. I wasn't muted when Logan was talking. So weird. Hi, Carsey. Carsey, can you hear me? Thank you, Carsey, for the heart. Hola. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. So can you hold on? I'm gonna put the rain back on. Can you hear me now? Hi, Linbin. Can you hear me with the rain? Maybe. Possibly. Get that, Carsey. There is a chance I hear you. Brother, just be straight up. Carsey, I can trust you. Can you hear me? It's really loud? Brother. Okay, I don't know how to change the sound. Fine. We'll do without. Anyways. The rain is really loud too. Whatever. We don't need it. Anyways, hi. Welcome to my ASMR reading stream that was requested. I'll just turn down the sound later. We're gonna forgo the rain for now, sadly. I know, no sweet little ASMR twinkling sound. Or I could open it up on my computer. I might do that actually. Hold on. I'll just open it up on my computer and we can have it like as ambience in the background. Anyways, while I set that up, you ate a bee once. That doesn't sound conducive to your health, Linvin. Anyways, so people said that I should do ASMR reading, so here I am. And I chose the only book that I have in my house. You are the Buffin Man. The only book I have in my house. Not the only book. But the only book I thought was interesting enough to read on stream in my house. It's not like philosophy or like, I don't know. So in case you couldn't tell by the title, I'm reading 1984 by George Orwell. Now, I don't know much about this book. I just know that it's a meme. You're the milkman, and your milk is delicious. It is a meme, and hi, Chewy Ashia. It's a meme, and why is my computer opening Discord? It's a meme, and they turned the entirety of Britain into an airfield, which I think is based, and you should do that in real life. So if you want to turn Britain into an airfield, stick around, because that's what we're going to do. Let me just pull up rain sounds. $10 of rain. The horrors of the government. Hi, Danganronpa FBI. Does it now? I've never read it. This is my first time reading it. So I have no idea what I'm in store for. Also, it's by a British guy. Should I read it in a British accent? No, I think you're talking about the right book, Carsey. Should I read 1984 in a British accent? What do you guys think? What does this do? Okay, this filters. I'll wait for like a singular. If you so desire. I don't know. I'll see if the desire hits me. Read it in a Deku accent. Okay. George Orwell's the pen name of Englishman. I'm not doing that. What is that Deku accent? Where's he from? Okay. It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. Winston Smith, his chin... Fine. Okay, I'll do it in a British accent. Winston Smith, his chin nuzzled into his breast in an effort to escape the vile wind, slipped quickly through the glass doors of Victory Mansions, though not quickly enough to prevent a swirl of gritty dust from entering along with him. The hallway smelt of boiled cabbage and old rag mats. At one end of it, a coloured poster, too large for indoor display, had been tacked to the wall. It depicted simply an enormous face, more than a metre wide, the face of a man about 45, with a heavy black moustache and ruggedly handsome features. Winston made for the stairs. It was no use trying the lift. Even at the best of times it was seldom working, and at present the electric current was cut off during daylight hours. It was part of the economy drive in preparation for Hate Week. The flat was 7 flights up, and in Winston, who was 39, had a varicose ulcer about his right ankle, went slowly, resting several times on the way. On each landing, opposite the left shaft, the poster with the enormous face gazed from the wall. It was one of those pictures which are so contrived that the eye is following you about even when you move. Big Brother is watching you. More. I'm still reading. The caption beneath it ran, "Inside the flat, a fruity voice." Inside the flat, a fruity voice was reading out a list of figures which had something to do with the production of pig iron. The voice came from the oblong metal plaque, like a doled mirror, which formed part of the surface of the right-hand wall. Winston turned a switch and the voice sank somewhat. Though the words were still distinguishable. The instrument, the telescreen it was called, could be dimmed, but there was no way of shutting it off completely. He moved over to the window, a smallish, frail figure, the meagreness of his body merely emphasized by the blue overalls which were the uniform of the party. His hair was very fair, his face was naturally sanguine, his skin roughened by coarse soap and blunt razor blades of the cold winter that just ended. Outside, even through the shut window pane, the world looked cold. Down in the street, little eddies of the wind were wheeling dust and torn paper into spirals, and though the sun was shining, and the sky a harsh blue, there seemed to be no colour in anything except the posters that were plastered everywhere. The black mustachioed face gazed down from every commanding corner. There was one on the house in front, immediately opposite. Big Brother is watching you. Read it as Wallace. Oh my god. The caption said, while the dark eyes looked deep into Winston's own. I'm not doing that. Down at the street level, another poster, torn at the corner. Flapped fitfully in the wind, alternatingly covering and uncovering the single word, Ingsoc. In the far distance, a helicopter skimmed down between the roofs, hovered for an instant like a bluebottle, and darted away again with a curving flight. It was the police patrol, snooping into people's windows. The patrols did not matter, however. Only the thought police mattered. Big bro, true. Behind Winston's back, the voice from the telescreen was babbling away about pig iron and the over-fulfillment of the 9th 3-year plan. The telescreen had received and transmitted simultaneously. Any sound that Winston made above the level of a very low whisper would be picked up by it. Moreover, So long as he remained within the field of vision which the metal plaque had commanded, he could be seen as well as heard. I'm going to move my book a little bit so I can see better. There was, of course, no way of knowing whether you were being watched at any given moment. How often or on what system the thought police plugged in on any individual wire was guesswork. It was even conceivable that they were watched everybody at the time. But at any rate, they could plug into your wire whenever they wanted to. You had to live, and did live, from habit that became instinct, in the assumption that every sound you made was overheard, and, except in darkness, every movement scrutinized. Winston kept his back turned to the telescreen. It was safer, though, as he well knew, even a back can be revealing. A kilometre away, the Ministry of Truth, his place of work, towered vast and white over the grimy landscape. This, he thought, with a sort of vague distaste, this was London, the chief city of Airstrip 1, itself the third most populous of the provinces of Oceania. He tried to squeeze out some childhood memory that could tell him whether London had always been quite like this. Were these always the vistas of rotting 19th century houses, the sides shored up with balks of timber, the windows patched with cardboard and the roofs corrugated iron, the crazy garden walls sagging in all directions? And the bomb sites where plaster dust swirled in the air, and the willow herbs straggled over heaps of rubble, and the places where the bombs had cleared a large path, and there had sprung up sordid colonies of wooden dwellings like chicken houses. But it was no use. He could not remember. Nothing remained of his childhood except a series of bright-lit tableaux, occurring against no background and mostly unintelligible. The Ministry of Truth, Minitru in Newspeak, was startlingly different from any other object in sight. It was an enormous pyramidal structure of glittering white concrete, soaring up terrace after terrace, 300 meters into the air. From where Winston stood, it was just possible to read, picked out on its white face in elegant lettering, the three slogans of the party. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. Hello, call me eggs. The Ministry of Truth contained, it was said, 3,000 rooms above ground level and the corresponding ramifications below. Scattering about London, there were just 3 other buildings of similar appearance and size. So completely did they dwarf the surrounding architecture that from the roof of Victory Mansions you could see all 4 of them simultaneously. They were the homes of the 4 ministries between which the entire apparatus of the government was divided. The Ministry of Truth, which concerned itself with news, entertainment, education, and the fine arts. The Ministry of Peace, which concerned itself with war. The Ministry of Love, which maintained law and order. The Ministry of Plenty, which was responsible for economic affairs. Their names, in Newspeak, Minitru, Minipax, Minilove, and Miniplenty. The Ministry of Love was a really frightening one. There was no windows in it at all. Winston had never been inside the Ministry of Truth, nor within half a kilometre of it. It was a place impossible to enter except on official business, and only by penetrating through a maze of barbed wire entanglements, steel doors, and hidden machine gun nests. Even the streets leading up to its outer barrier were roamed by gorilla-faced guards in black uniforms, armed with jointed truncheons. Winston turned round abruptly. He had set his features into the expression of quiet optimism, which it was advisable to wear when facing the telescreen. Where's the FBI ministry? Washington. At any time. Where was I? He crossed the room into the tiny kitchen. By leaving the ministry at this time of day, he had sacrificed his lunch in the canteen, and he was aware that there was no food in the kitchen except a hunk of dark-coloured bread, which had got to be saved for tomorrow's breakfast. He took down from the shelf a bottle of colourless liquid which kept in a plain white label marked Victory Gin. It gave off a sickly, oily smell, as of Chinese rice spirit. Winston poured out nearly a teacupful, nerved himself for the shock, and gulped it down like a dose of medicine. Instantly, his face turned scarlet and the water ran out of his eyes. The stuff was like nitric acid, and moreover, bro, you should be a VA. Well, I mean, that's what I'm trying to do. And moreover, in swallowing it, one had the sensation of being hit on the back of the head with a rubber club. The next moment, however, the burning in his belly died down, and the world began to look more cheerful. He took a cigarette from a crumpled packet marked Victory Cigarettes and incautiously held it upright, whereupon the tobacco fell out onto the floor. With the next, he was more successful. He went back to the living room and sat down at the small table that stood at the left of the telescreen. From the table drawer, he took out a pen holder, a bottle of ink, and a thick quarto-sized blank book with a red back and marble cover. For some reason, the telescreen in the living room was an unusual position. Instead of being placed, as was normal, in the end wall, where it could command the whole room, it was in the longer wall, opposite the window. To one side of it there was a shallow alcove, in which Winston was now sitting, and which, when the flats were built, had probably been intended to hold bookshelves. By sitting in the alcove, and keeping his back to the wall, Winston was able to remain outside the range of the telescreen. Thank you, Ray says good morning. So far as sight went, he could be heard, of course, but not so long as he stayed in the present position he could be seen. It was partly the unusual geography of the room that had suggested to him that he was now about to do, but it also had been suggested by the book he had just taken out of the drawer. It was a peculiarly beautiful book. Its smooth, creamy paper, a little yellowed by age, was of a kind that had not been manufactured for at least 40 years past. He could guess, however, that the book was much older than that. He had seen it lying in the window of a frowsy little junk shop in a slummy quarter of the town, just what quarter he did not now remember, and had been stricken immediately by an overwhelming desire to possess it. Party members were not supposed to go into ordinary shops. Dealing on the free market, it was called. But the rule was not so strictly kept, because there were various things such as shoelaces and razor blades which was impossible to get a hold of in any other way. He had been given a quick glance up and down the street, and then slipped inside and bought the book for $2.50. At the time, he was not conscious of wanting it for any particular reason. He carried it guiltily home in a briefcase, even with nothing written in it, with a compromising possession. The thing that he was about to do was open a diary. This was not illegal. Nothing was illegal, since there were no longer any laws. But if detected, it was reasonably certain that it would be punished by death, or at least by 25 years in a forced labour camp. Winston fitted off a nib into the pen holder and sucked it to get the grease off. The pen was an archaic instrument, seldom used for even signatures, and he had procured one, furtively and with some difficulty, simply because of a feeling that the beautiful creamy paper deserved to be written on with a real nib instead of being scratched with an ink pencil. Actually, he was not used to writing by hand. Apart from short notes, it was usual to dictate everything into a speakwrite, which was of course impossible for his present purpose. He dipped the pen into the ink and faltered for a second. The tremor had gone through his bowels. To mark the paper was the decisive act. In clumsy letters he wrote, April 4th, 1984. He sat back. A sense of complete helplessness had descended upon him. To begin with, he did not know with any certainty that this was 1984. It must be round to that date, since he was fairly sure that his age was 39, and he believed that he had been born in 1944 or 1945. But it was never possible nowadays to pin down any date within a year or two. For whom, it suddenly occurred to him to wonder, was he writing this diary? For the future? For the unborn? His mind hovered for a moment round the doubtful date on the paper, and then fetched up with a bump against the newspeak word, double-think. For the first time, the magnitude of what he had undertaken came home to him. How could you communicate with the future? It was of its nature impossible. Either the future would resemble the present, in which case it would not listen to him, or it would be different from it, and his predicament would be meaningless. For some time he sat gazing stupidly at the paper. The telescreen had changed over to strident military music. It was curious that he seemed not merely to have lost the power of expressing himself, but even to have forgotten what it was that he had originally intended to say. British. For weeks past he had been making ready for this moment, and it never crossed his mind that anything would be needed except courage. The actual writing would be easy. All he had to do was transfer the paper to the interminable restless monologue that had been running inside his head, literally for years. At this moment, however, even the monologue had dried up. Moreover, his varicose ulcer began edging unbearably. He dared not scratch it, because if he did so, it always became inflamed. The seconds were ticking by. He was conscious of nothing except the blankness of the page in front of him, the itching of the skin above his ankle, the blaring of its music, and the slight booziness of the gin. How are you guys doing? We've had 3 viewers. I'm taking a slight pause to make a little tea break because I'm very British right now. It's gone a little bit cool. I'm having fun. Suddenly, he began writing in sheer panic, only imperfectly aware of what he was setting down. His small but childish handwriting straggled up and down the page, shedding at first its capital letters and finally even full stops. April 4th, 1984. Tea biscuits, true. Last night to the flicks, all war films. One very good one of a ship full of refugees being bombed somewhere in the Mediterranean. Audience much amused by shots. A great huge fat man trying to swim away with a helicopter after him. First you saw him wallowing along in the water like a porpoise. Then you saw him through the helicopter gun sights. Then he was full of holes and the sea round him turned pink, and he sank as suddenly as though the holes had let in water. The audience shouting with laughter when he sank. Then you saw a lifeboat full of children with a helicopter hovering over it. Does your tea contain any kinds of dairy products? No, I'm actually lactose intolerant. Can I have some water? You may. There was a middle-aged woman, might have been a Jewess, sitting up in, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that, in the bow with a little boy, about 3 years old in her arm. The little boy was screaming with fright and hiding his head between her breasts as if he was trying to burrow right into her, and the woman putting her arms around him and comforting him, although she was blue with fright herself, all the time covering him up as much as possible as if she thought her arms could keep the bullets off him. Then the helicopter planted a 20-kilo bomb in among them. Terrific flash, and the boat went all to matchwood. Then there was a wonderful shot of a child's arms going right up into the air. A helicopter with a camera in its nose must have followed it, and there was a lot of applause from the party seats, but a woman down in the pro part of the house suddenly started kicking up a fuss and shouting they didn't ought to show it, not in front of kids anyway. Then they didn't, it ain't right, not in front of the kids, it ain't until the police turn out. I don't suppose anything happened to her. Nobody cares what happens to the pro side, typical pro reaction, they never. Winston stopped writing, partly because he was suffering from cramp. He did not know what made him pour out this steam of rubbish, but the curious thing was that while he was doing so, a totally different memory, beans on toast, had clarified itself in his mind to the point where he almost felt equal to writing it down. It was, he now realized, because of this other incident that he had suddenly decided to come home and begin the diary today. Actually, on some of the other posts I've done where I've done British accents, I've had people tell me that 1, beans on toast is really good, and 2, I should try it. And I keep telling people, I must say, I've never been into, nor have I listened to ASMR, but this is pleasant. Well, I don't think it's not really traditional ASMR. I'm just reading a book in a pleasant voice with some rain sounds in the background, which I think is pleasant, you know. It's almost an audio book. this is my first time doing live ASMR. And people keep telling me to eat beans on toast, and I keep telling them I will eat beans on toast when I'm cast as Diego from JoJo's. Okay. It had happened that morning at the ministry. If anything so nebulous could be said to happen. It was nearly 11. They're really good. That's interesting. It was nearly 1100, and in the records department where Winston worked, they were dragging the chair out of the cubicles and grouping them in the centre of the hall, opposite the big telescreen, in preparation for the 2 minutes hate. Winston was just taking his place in one of the middle rows when two people whom he knew by sight, but had never spoken to, came unexpectedly into the room. One was a girl whom he often passed in corridors. He did not know her name, but he knew she worked in the fiction department, presumably because since he had sometimes seen her with oily hands and carrying a spanner. She had some mechanical job on one of the novel-writing machines. She was a bold-looking girl of about 27, with thick dark hair, a freckled face, a swift athletic movements. A narrow scarlet sash, emblem of the Junior Anti-Sex League, was wound several times around the waist of her overalls, just tightly enough to bring out the shapeliness of her hips. Winston had disliked her from the first moment of seeing her. He knew the reason. It was because of the atmosphere of the hockey fields and cold baths, and the community hikes and general clean-mindedness which she managed to carry about with her. He disliked nearly all women, especially the young and pretty ones, based. That's a joke. It was always the women, above all the young ones, who were the most bigoted adherents of the party, the swallowers of slogans, the amateur spies, the nose-outers of the unorthodoxy. But this particular girl gave him the impression of being more dangerous than most. Once, when they passed in the corridor, she had given him a quick sidelong glance, which seemed to pierce right into him, and for a moment had filled him with black terror. The idea had even crossed his mind that she might be an agent of the thought police. That, it was true, was very unlikely. Still, he continued to feel a peculiar uneasiness, which had fear mixed up in it, as well as hostility, whenever she was anywhere near him. Yeah. I believe it means like young adults, not like children. They did say she was 27. The other person was a man named O'Brien, a member of the inner party and holder of some post so important and remote that Winston had only a dim idea of its nature. A momentary hush passed over the group of people around the chairs as they saw black overalls of an inner party. "Hello, thirsty Okiasu Daily." To quote Spike Spiegel, "I love a woman that can kick my ass." You're welcome, that one's for free. A momentary hush passed over the group of people round the chairs as they saw the black overalls of an inner party member approaching. O'Brien was a large, burly man with a thick neck and a coarse, humorous, brutal face. In spite of his formidable appearance, he had a certain charm of manner. He had a thick of resettling his spectacles on his nose, which was curiously disarming, in some indefinable way, curiously civilized. It was a gesture which, if anyone had still thought in such terms, might be recalled an 18th century nobleman offering his snuff-box. I love those. I suppose you do. Winston had seen O'Brien perhaps a dozen times in as many years. He felt deeply drawn to him, not solely because he was intrigued by the contrast between O'Brien's urbane manner and his prized fighter's physique. Much more it was because of his secretly held belief, or perhaps not even a belief, merely a hope, that O'Brien's political orthodoxy was not perfect. Something in his face suggested it was irresistibly, and again, preface, but simply intelligence. But at any rate he had the appearance of being a person that you could talk to, if somehow you could cheat the telescreen and get him alone. Winston had never made the smallest effort to verify this guess. Indeed, there was no way of doing so. At this moment, O'Brien glanced at his wristwatch and saw it was nearly 1100, and evidently decided to stay in the records department until 2 minutes hate was over. He took a chair in the same row as Winston, a couple of places away. A small, sandy-haired woman who was working in the next cubicle to Winston was between them. The girl with dark hair was sitting immediately behind. The next moment, a hideous, grinding screech, as of some monstrous machine running without oil, burst from the big telescreen at the end of the room. It was a noise that set one's teeth on edge and bristled the hair at the back of one's neck. The hate had started. I'm going to take another tea break. Check in with my audience. Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing? I might lean back a little bit. I'm kind of hunched over right now. Not the most comfortable position. If you'll give me all of about 5 seconds, I'll readjust myself. Oh, bollocks. There we are. Good. My food is done. And the reading, of course. Well, I hope to provide a nice meal entertainment. As usual, the face of Emmanuel Goldstein, the enemy of the people, had flashed onto the screen. There were hisses here and there among the audience. The little sandy-haired woman gave a squeak of mingled fear and disgust. Goldstein was a renegade and backslider who once, long ago, how long ago nobody quite remembered, had been one of the leading figures in the party. Almost. Sadly, you got to go. Oh, goodbye. Did you say bollocks? I did say bollocks. I'm in character. So I've been relaxed listening to your life. Oh, that's nice. On a level with Big Brother himself. And then had been engaged in counter-revolutionary activities, had been condemned to death, and had mysteriously escaped and disappeared. The programme of the 2 Minutes Hates varied from day to day. There was none in which Goldstein was not the principal figure. He was the primal traitor, the earliest defiler of the party's purity. All subsequent crimes against the party, all treacheries, acts of sabotage, heresies, deviations, spring directly out of his teaching. Somewhere or other he was alive and hatching his conspiracies, perhaps somewhere beyond the sea, under the protection of his foreign paymasters, perhaps even, so it was occasionally rumoured, hiding in some hiding place in Oceania itself. Winston's diaphragm was constricted. He could never see the face of Goldstein without a painful mixture of emotions. It was a lean Jewish face, with a great fuzzy aureole of white hair and a small goatee beard. A clever face, and yet somehow inherently despicable, with a kind of senile silliness in the long thin nose near the end of which a pair of spectacles was perched. Hello, Jothric. Where was I? Was perched. It resembled the face of a sheep, and the voice, too, had a sheep-like quality. Goldstein was delivering his usual venomous attack upon the doctrines of the party, an attack so exaggerated and perverse that a child should have been able to see through it, and yet just plausible enough to fill one with an alarmed feeling that other people, less level-headed than oneself, might be taken by it. He was abusing Big Brother. He was denouncing the dictatorship of the party. He was demanding the immediate conclusion of peace with Eurasia. He was advocating freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, freedom of thought. He was crying hysterically that the revolution had been betrayed. And all this in rapid polysyllabic speech, which was sort of a parody of the habitual style of the orators of the party. And even contained newspeak words. More newspeak words, indeed, than any party member would normally use in real life. And all the while, lest one should be in any doubt as to the reality of which Goldstein's specious claptrap covered, behind his head on the telescreen there marched in endless columns of the Eurasian army, row after row of solid-looking men with expressionless Asiatic faces, who swam up to the surface of the screen and vanished, to be replaced by others exactly similar. The dull, rhythmic tramp of the soldiers' boots formed the background to Goldstein's bleating voice. Before the hate had proceeded for 30 seconds, Uncontrollable exclamations of rage were breaking out from half the people in the room. The self-satisfied sheep-like face on the screen and the terrifying power of the Eurasian army behind it were too much to be borne. Besides, the sight or even thought of Goldstein produced fear and anger automatically. He was an object of hatred more constant than either Eurasia or Eastasia. Since when Oceania was at war with one of these powers, it was generally at peace with the other. But what was strange was that although Goldstein was hated and despised by everybody, although every day, and 1,000 times a day, on platforms, on the telescreen, in the newspaper, in books, his theories were refuted, smashed, ridiculed, held up to the general gaze for the pitiful rubbish that they were. In spite of all this, his influence never seemed to grow less. Always there were fresh dupes waiting to be seduced by him. A day never passed where spies and saboteurs acting under his direction were not unmasked by the thought police. Hello, Kevin. Me when it's 1984, literally. And that's what we're doing. We're reading 1984. He was not unmasked by the thought police. He was the commander of the vast shadowy army, an underground network of conspirators dedicated to overthrow of the state. The Brotherhood, its name was supposed to be. There were also whimpered stories of a terrible book, a compendium of all the heresies of which Goldstein was the author, and which circulated clandestinely here and there. It was a book without a title. People referred to it, if at all, simply as the book. One knew of such things only through vague rumours. Neither the Brotherhood nor the book was a subject of any ordinary party member would mention if there was a way of avoiding it. In its second minute, the haze rose to a frenzy. People were leaping up and down in their place and shouting at the tops of their voices in an effort to drown out the maddening bleating of voices that came from the screen. The little sandy-haired woman had turned bright pink, and her mouth was opening and shutting like that of a landed fish. Even O'Brien's heavy face was flushed. He was sitting very straight in his chair, his powerful chest swelling and quivering as though he was standing up to the assault of a wave. The dark-haired girl behind Winston had begun crying out, "Swine! Swine! Swine!" And suddenly she picked up a heavy Newspeak dictionary, flung it at the screen. It struck Goldstein's nose and bounced off, the voice continuing inexorably. In a lucid moment, Winston found that he was shouting with the others and kicked his heel violently against the rung of his chair. The horrible thing about 2-minute hate was not that one was obliged to act a part, but it was impossible to avoid joining in. Within 30 seconds, any pretense was always unnecessary. A hideous ecstasy of fear and vindictiveness, a desire to kill, to torture, to smash faces in with a sledgehammer, seemed to flow through the whole group of people like an electric current, turning one, even against one's will, into a grimacing, screaming lunatic. And yet the rage that one felt was an abstract, undirected emotion which could be switched from one object to another like the flame of a blow lamp. Thus, at one moment, Winston's hatred was not turned against Goldstein at all, but on the contrary against Big Brother, the party, and the thought police. At such moments his heart went out to the lonely, derided heretic on screen, sole guardian of the truth and sanity in a world of lies. And at the very next instant he was at one with the people about him, and all that was said of Goldstein seemed to be true. All those moments his secret loathing of Big Brother changed into adoration, and Big Brother seemed to tower up in an invincible, fearless protector, standing up like a rock against the hordes of Asia. And Goldstein, in spite of his insulation, his helplessness, and the doubt that hung about his very existence, seemed like some sinister enchanter, incapable of, by mere power of his voice, of wrecking the structure of civilization. Can you read a paragraph, but it's Metaton EX? Sure. Just for you. How do I do Metaton? Oh, yes. It was even possible at moments to switch one's hatred this way or that by voluntary acts. Suddenly, by the sort of violent effort with which one wrenches one's head away from the pillow in a nightmare, Winston succeeded in transferring his hatred from the face on the screen to the dark-haired girl behind him. Vivid, beautiful hallucinations flashed through his mind. He would flog her to death with a rubber truncheon. He would tie her naked to a stake and shoot her full of arrows like Saint Sebastian. He would ravish her and cut her throat at the moment of climax. Better than before, moreover, he realized why he hated her. He hated her because he wanted to be young and pretty and sexless. Because she was young and pretty and sexless. Because he wanted to go to bed with her and he would never do so. Because round her sweet, supple waist, which seemed to ask only to encircle it with your arm, there were only odious scarlet sash, aggressive symbol of chastity. Thank you. I love reading his Mettaton. He's my favourite character to voice. I don't know if you saw the video I did for Christmas. I did a little bit of a skit in his voice. Darling, please. Right. Oh my. Actually, Danganronpa FBI. I'm playing Undertale on Twitch right now, and we just got to the Mettaton part, and I play him, and I have a voice changer and everything. So if you want to see more of that, check out my Twitch. The hate rose to its climax. The voice of Goldstein had become an actual sheep's bleat, and for an instant the face changed into that of a sheep. Then the soldier's face melted to the figure of your Asian soldier, who seemed to be advancing, huge and terrible, his submachine gun roaring. Yes, I did. Thank you. Thank you, Ray says good morning. Raisins was amazing. Your voice would be cannon for him. Thank you. His submachine gun roaring and seeming to spring out of the surface of the screen, so that some of the people in the front row actually flinched backwards in their seats. But in the same moment, drawing a deep sigh of relief from everybody, the hostile figure melted into the face of Big Brother, black-haired and black-mustachioed, full of power and mysterious calm, so vast that it almost filled up the screen. Nobody heard what Big Brother was saying. It was merely a few words of encouragement, a sort of words that were uttered in the din of battle, not distinguishable individually, but restoring confidence by the fact that being spoken. Then the face of Big Brother faded away again, and instead the three slogans of the party in bold capitals: war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. But the face of Big Brother seemed to persist for several seconds on the screen, as though the impact of it that it had made on everybody's eyeballs was too vivid to wear off immediately. The little sandy-haired woman had flung herself forward over the back of a chair in front of her. With a tremulous murmur that sounded like "my saviour," she extended her arms towards the screen. Then she buried her face in her hands. It was apparent that she was uttering a prayer. At this moment, the entire group of people broke into a slow, deep, slow, rhythmic chant. B, 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 over and over again, very slowly, with a long pause between the first B and the second, a heavy, murmurous sound, somehow curiously savage, in the background of which one would seem to hear the stamp of naked feet and throbbing of tom-toms. But perhaps as 30 seconds they kept it up, it was a refrain that was often heard in moments of overwhelming emotion. Partly it was a sort of hymn of wisdom and majesty of Big Brother, but still more it was an act of self-hypnosis, a deliberate drowning of consciousness by means of rhythmic noise. Winston's entrails seemed to grow cold. In the 2-minute hate, he could not help but sharing in the general delirium, but the subhuman chanting of B, 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 B always filled him with horror. Of course, he chanted with the rest. It was impossible to do otherwise. To dissemble your feelings, to control your face, to do what everyone else was doing was an intrinsic reaction. But there was a space of a couple seconds during which the expression in his eyes might conceivably have been betrayed by him. And it was exactly in this moment that the significant thing happened, if indeed it did happen. Momentarily, he caught O'Brien's eye. O'Brien had stood up. He had taken off his spectacles and was in the act of resettling them on his nose with a characteristic gesture. But there was a fraction of a second when their eyes met, and for as long as it took to happen, Winston knew, yes, he knew, that O'Brien was thinking the same thing as himself. An unmistakable message had passed. It was as though their two minds had opened, and the thoughts were flowing from one into the other through their eyes. I am with you, O'Brien seemed to say. Saying to him, I know precisely what you are feeling. I know all about your contempt, your hatred, your disgust. But don't worry, I'm on your side. And then the flash of intelligence was gone, and O'Brien's face was inscrutable as everyone else's was. That was all, and he was already uncertain whether it had happened. Such incidents never had any sequel. All that they did was to keep alive in him the belief or hope that others beside himself were enemies of the party. Perhaps the rumours of vast underground conspiracies were true after all. Perhaps the Brotherhood really existed. It was impossible, in spite of the endless arrests and confessions and executions, to be sure that the Brotherhood was not simply a myth. Some days he believed in it, some days not. There was no evidence, only fleeting glimpses that might mean anything or nothing. Snatches of overheard conversation, faint scribbles on laboratory walls. Once, even when two strangers met, a small movement of their hands which looked as though it might have signalled a recognition. It was all guesswork. Very likely he'd imagined everything. He'd gone back to his cubicle without looking at O'Brien again. The idea of following up their momentary contact hardly crossed his mind. It would have been inconceivably dangerous, even if he had known how to set about doing it. For a second, 2 seconds, they had exchanged an equivocal glance. That was the end of the story. But even that was a memorable event, in the locked loneliness in which one had to live. Oddly enough, 1984 has reminded me of A Wrinkle in Time a few times. How's that? Hi, what am I going to call you? Jean? I'll just call you Jean because that's your Instagram name. Hello. We're reading on stream. Thank you for joining us. Very low-key stream. Yes, I've been to two of their streams. They get into shenanigans. That's true. We're reading 1984, and I'm doing it in a British accent because, I don't know, it felt appropriate. Welcome to our little community. Lovely. It's just like Polnareff. Winston roused himself and sat up straighter. He let out a belch. The gin was rising from his stomach. His eyes refocused on the page. He discovered that while he sat helplessly musing, he had also been writing, as though by automatic action. And it was no longer that the same cramped, awkward handwriting as before. His pen had slipped voluptuously over the smooth paper, printing in large, neat capital letters, "Down with Big Brother! Down with Big Brother! Down with Big Brother! Down with Big Brother! Down with Big Brother!" Over and over again, filling half a page. He could not help feeling a twinge of panic. It was absurd, since the writing of those particular words was not more dangerous than the initial act of opening the diary. But for a moment he was tempted to tear out the spoiled pages and abandon the enterprise altogether. But he did not do so, however, because he knew that it was useless. When he wrote down with Big Brother, whether he refrained from writing it made no difference. Whether he went on with the diary, or whether he did not go on with it, made no difference. The thought police would get him just the same. He had committed, would still have committed, even if he had never set pen to paper, the essential crime that contained all others in itself. Thought crime. They called it thought crime, was not a thing that could be concealed forever. You might dodge it successfully for a while, even for years, but sooner or later they were bound to get you. In regards to the mental brainwashing stuff, that's what the big bad will do, subjugate. That's true. It was always at night. The arrests invariably happened at night. A sudden jerk out of your sleep, the rough hand shaking at your shoulder, the lights glaring in your eyes. Hello, Kerpel. the ring of hard faces round the bed. The vast majority of cases, there was no trial, no report of the arrest. People simply disappeared, always during the night. Your name was removed from the registers. Every record of everything you had ever done was wiped out. Your once-time existence was denied and then forgotten. You were abolished, annihilated, vaporized was the usual word. For a moment he was seized by a kind of hysteria. He began writing in a hurried, untidy scrawl. They'll shoot me. I don't care. They'll shoot me in the back of the neck. I don't care. With Big Brother, they always shoot you in the back of the neck. I don't care. Down with Big Brother. He sat back in the chair, slightly ashamed of himself, and laid down his pen. The next moment he started violently. There was a knocking at the door. He sat back in his chair, slightly ashamed of himself, and laid down his pen. Oh, wait, I read that. Already! He sat as still as a mouse, in the futile hope that whoever it might go away after a single attempt. But no, the knocking repeated. The worst thing of all would be to delay. His heart was thumping like a drum, but his face, from long habit, was probably expressionless. He got up and moved heavily toward the door. All right, that's chapter 1. I was probably only going to read one chapter anyways. I don't know. You guys have fun? I had fun. Let me just find something to bookmark this with. Then we can go back to like a chatting stream. How are people doing today? Hi. Thank you. Dude, you're making me want to read this so bad. Thank you. That was sick. Aw, thank you. People had been requesting that I like do ASMR. I guess I like the rain sounds. People had been requesting that I read like on stream, or, like do ASMR before. So I'm like, okay, I don't want to do like the gross hot tub stuff they do on Twitch. So I just picked up like the one interesting book I had in my room and started reading it. You know, also I wanted just like an excuse to start reading again. So that was fun. If any mutuals want to hop on with me, just chat now. You're welcome to.